Good morning on this Sunday, April 14th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Former President Donald Trump in Atlanta for a high-dollar fundraiser and weighs in on the abortion debate. Also, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens reveals where he wants to see 4 new MARTA stations. And Senator Jon Ossoff releases a scathing report on Georgia's child welfare agency. But the agency calls this political gamesmanship. Kathy, Phil, and Martha are all here. Alicia Thomas-Searcy is filling in for Theron. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Former President Donald Trump was in Atlanta this week for a high-dollar fundraising event. He didn't hold back on Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis and the 2020 election interference case.
It was a money-making scheme on behalf of her and her lover, Wade, Mr. and Mrs. Wade. And I think the case has been totally discredited, I would hope, and it seems to be. And we'll see how that, and the one in New York is totally discredited. Every legal scholar said they have no case. It's a horrible thing, but it's election interference.
The former president was in Metro Atlanta for a fundraiser with local businesses and supporters, including former U.S. Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. He also made a stop at a Vine City Chick-fil-A.
We're going to get rid of Biden. Yeah!
This week, the former president said if he becomes president again, he would not sign a national abortion ban.
53 years it's been a fight, and now the states are handling it, and some have handled it very well, and the others will end up handling it very well, and those are the things that states are going to make a determination about.
All right, let's run the table because there's a lot to unpack here. First, Martha, your thoughts on how the former president is really trying to thread the abortion issue.
Well, he got both sides kind of mad at him as a result of it. Sometimes that means you're doing the right thing, you know, when you have both sides talking about it. I was surprised. I'll tell you, as a person that's been very involved in this issue, I thought he was going to take more of a stand. But after listening to it the second time, I think he did a better job. One thing that was interesting is we did actually have him on for our 75th anniversary, and he talked about empowerment zones and building businesses and things like that, and he was very good. So when you get him talking about issues, generally he does a better job. And the fundraiser was a success, and the stops afterwards were too.
Alicia?
Good for him for fundraising. You know, there's a saying that we all know: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And Donald Trump continues to show people who he is, but Republicans still don't believe him. He's a liar. And he's going to change his political positions depending on the wind. So first he's bragging about how he sat the Supreme Court justices in order to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now all of a sudden it's all about what should happen at the states. And so I just think that he's doing whatever he thinks he needs to do based on the polling. It's unfortunate, but again, people are going to continue to vote for him. Sadly, there are some people that are going to continue to vote for him no matter how much he lies.
Well, you keep talking about lies. Any politician can pivot. And what happened is, to clarify for the audience, Roe v. Wade, when it was gone with the Supreme Court, went back to all 50 states. And that's what Trump said the state legislatures now should do that in all states. If some people want to have exceptions on abortion, fine, those state legislatures can do it. Others can have more restrictions. So it's not a lie. It's just a fact that's happened now. It's reality that it's in all 50 states. I think he properly pivoted, Martha, and I think that the polling is ahead in Georgia. I don't see where he's unpopular here. He's still doing very well in 5 of the 6 swing states. He raised in Atlanta, and then he had an Orlando event that same Wednesday last week. He raised $15 million from the high donors. The Haley people are coming back to him. I think that he had a great week. And by the way, when he stopped off in Vine City at the Chick-fil-A, it was a predominantly African-American crowd that gave him a warm welcome and said, you know, we don't like Biden, we don't like inflation, we don't like open borders. Wow.
Phil, let me ask you this, because before Roe v. Wade was overturned, Republicans were like, it's a states' rights issue. Leave it up to the states. And now this is basically what the former president is saying, and there's so many members of the Republican Party who are now upset with him over this, him not wanting to sign a national ban if he becomes president.
You're correct, and there's a lot of the pro-lifers would like to see a national abortion ban. That's not going to happen. Politically, it's a mistake, and I think that the states, as a conservative who was a states writer myself, I think the states ought to be doing this.
Kathy, Democrats are looking to make this obviously an issue front and center. What is the strategy here, and what do you think about the former president's stance on the national ban?
Well, he has flip-flopped, and I think that's a problem. I think also we have to be reminded that the makeup of the Supreme Court, happened because Mitch McConnell was willing to take extraordinary measures to prevent Obama from having his choice of a Supreme Court while he was in office. So there's that. But, when you start thinking about what kind of health care you get depends on where you live, then you start really having a fractured society. And I think that's problematic when you start saying, well, some states you can get abortions, some states you can't get abortions. That's a sad state of affairs for us as a country, and I think we need to change who's in Washington.
Martha.
And just a quick point, politicians change their viewpoints all the time. I don't know what President Biden thinks about Israel because he's had 15 different viewpoints since the war started and the things that he said. If you think Donald Trump is the first politician to pander to people in an election year, I think you need to look at President Biden.
Alicia?
I think Donald Trump is the first president who is a known liar.
Oh, come on.
Who continues to break the law, who tried to overturn an entire election, who has been indicted in 3 different places. I don't think we've ever seen a president like that. Obviously, I've been in office before. I understand you can evolve on a position. That's not the issue here. We're talking about someone who has a track record of being a liar. Two quick things that I wanted to say. We also cannot forget, this is a national election. We're not just talking about Georgia, that in 7 other states, this has been on the ballot. Americans support a woman's right to choose. And at the end of the day, I never want us to forget that this is a health issue. While we're allowing politics and he's allowing politics to be over people, we've got to remember that there are women today making decisions about their bodies that, depending on where they live and where the state goes, they may or may not have those choices. We can never forget that.
Phil, what do you think about that issue? Because Democrats have been successful in these other states that she's referencing.
Well, 2 points. The polls do show that a majority do have a pro-choice position, but they do not want the radical Democrats' stand of abortion right up to the time of birth. And that's what all the Democrat senators voted for last year. And secondly, I think that's why you've got a middle road there with Republicans saying, let's have the states decide. And I think that abortion is not the #1 issue. It's an issue, and it's an important issue, but it's not the #1. Inflation, all the polls show, is a very important issue. And of course, the open borders, we're letting in anybody. So those are the issues.
All right.
That's a pivot. We're talking about abortion. We're not talking about the other things.
I'm not lying.
Well, we started out talking about other issues.
All right, so let's talk about another issue.
Yes.
On to the 2020 election interference case. A special prosecutor has been assigned to look into whether Georgia Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones should face criminal charges. The Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia announced this week that its executive director, Pete Scandalakis, will handle the matter. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis was barred, as you can recall, from prosecuting Jones because she had hosted a fundraiser for his Democratic opponent in the lieutenant governor's race. Kathy, your thoughts on Scandalakis and what could happen moving forward?
Well, anything could happen moving forward. The fact that it's taken 2 years to actually get this process going under Scandalakis, is of concern, about how serious he's taking it. But, he's also a serious prosecuting attorney, and I'm hopeful that he'll do his job and let us see justice in this. I think, the lieutenant governor, his actions deserve to be, brought before us and a judgment made. That he carried a letter that he was going to give to the vice president asking him to delay the electoral college vote is of serious concern, and we need to understand a little bit more about that.
Phil, the fact that this has taken so long, does this help or hurt the lieutenant governor, do you think?
Well, I think it helps him. #1, it never should have been brought to begin with. As you point out, Fani Willis was conflicted already and was removed, rightly so. It should have been dropped then. I think that Pete Scandalakis, with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, did the right thing in waiting. You have to see how the Fani Willis prosecution turned out and what Judge McAfee would do. And so I don't have a problem with the delay. I think it still should be dropped now. You know, sending a letter to delay the electoral vote for a few hours is not overturning an election. That's what I always get mad about when I see the mainstream media always overturning the election. No, it was questioning and perhaps a delay. You may not like the delay, but that's what it was.
Alicia?
I guess we're going to call this pivoting then. These are 19 people a part of a conspiracy. I read the indictment, I hope all of you have, where it clearly states all of the phone calls, all of the coordinated efforts. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones was a part of this effort. He signed a sworn affidavit saying that he was an elector after the election had already been called. That is against the law. We have to hold every person accountable. No one is above the law. I am glad that this case is now being investigated. It's unfortunate that he couldn't Scandalakis couldn't find anyone else, but I think he has a great reputation. I think it's going to be a fair process, and I too look forward to seeing how it ends up.
Final word.
Well, the lieutenant governor said bring it on, basically. I mean, he's ready for it. And there is a long history of alternate electors throughout our history in states. We're not the only one that's ever done it. I just think it's going to be interesting, but this case is not going to go anywhere.
Nope, and we aren't either. So up next, we now know where the Atlanta mayor wants to put 4 new MARTA stations. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
The details are out when it comes to the locations of 4 new MARTA stations. We already knew one was on the Beltline's West Side Trail. Now, the other 3 locations include Krog Street, Halsey Yards, Armour Yards, and Joseph E. Boone Boulevard. Kathy, let's go to our resident expert here on the panel when it comes to MARTA. Your thoughts on this? Any surprises here?
No, absolutely no surprises. They're interesting locations. Again, the challenge is why those specific locations. If you're going to put transit all the way around on the Beltline, you want to make sure that you're not spending, $150 million a pop without knowing specifically if that's where your crossroads is going to be. So here's my suggestion to the mayor, who's not listening to me generally, but I'm just going to say it. First, mothball the streetcar extension. Expanding something that doesn't have any riders to another location isn't going to get you more riders. Secondly, do an RFP on how we put transit on the entire Beltline and where those drop-in stations should go so that they complement that particular effort. And then let's see what this yields. But right now, it's just, where did this come from? We're just pulling it out of the air, and I think it's a pretext to stopping transit on the Beltline.
Well, I hope he's listening to you. You've got some good suggestions.
Thank
Phil?
you.
Well, I partially agree with you. I do think no one's riding the streetcar as it is now, so I don't know why they would be riding it again later. I think that number 2, you got to finish the Beltline. I think that's where the money ought to be going, and so do that. And then thirdly, I think that I don't think rail will ever be on the Beltline. I don't think you'll ever see it. Now, I talked about those locations last week because MARTA was telling me where they would be. I think they're in great 4 corners there. I think about maybe a mile and a half. If you go to MARTA, get on your scooter or bike or just walk, you can get around the Beltline. And so I was happy with those locations. We talked about money a little bit last week. And Lori, you made a point last week too that this is a time now of autonomous vehicles. And I think that ought to be explored. We're in the 21st century after all, and not 25 years ago. So I don't know where the other pools of money are going to come from.
Well,
Alicia, okay.
Just a quick answer. The pools of money are this. The finishing the Beltline is already included in the tax allocation district funding, so we don't have any concerns about that at this instant. But the money for building the transit has been approved by the voters 7 or 9 years ago, in addition to tax allocation district, in addition to the 1 cent. Atlanta has a 9 cent
that was the money to finish the Beltline?
Yes,
yeah.
Transit.
Yeah.
Alicia, welcome to this MARTA debate.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I've watched it for the last couple of weeks. It's been hot. And I am not Theron, so I don't have the level of expertise that he does, but I will say this in my observations. There are 2 things that I know about this mayor. Number 1, he cares very deeply about having a big perspective on housing, on education, on development. And so the second thing that I believe, since in observing him, is that when I'm looking at these 4 stations, they seem to be connected to his housing goals, and making sure that low-income people, thinking about Bowen Homes as an example, who may not have access to a lot of businesses, a lot of amenities in their community, now being able to connect them to Ponce City Market. So when I thought about this, I'm saying, I think these things are connected. These aren't random stops that they're creating. I think it's a part of his bigger plan to make sure that everybody in the city of Atlanta has access to these amenities, to transportation, to development. I do agree with you, Kathy, that I think there needs to be a comprehensive plan, though, when you talk about transportation, that's connected to his housing plan and plan Year of the Youth. And so I'm looking forward to all those things coming together, but I don't believe that this is sort of haphazard out of nowhere. I think he's being very intentional about where these stops are and making sure that he's meeting the needs of all the citizens of Atlanta.
Martha?
You know, and I think more than that is that this is where MARTA should have gone in the first place, okay? And I don't mean the location specifically, but having a more spread out way of getting around, because the biggest problem with MARTA from the beginning, and I was one of the first riders because I worked right at the 5 Point station, and I would ride every day, you know, and it was one of those things where they just didn't go anywhere. And when you got off the train, you couldn't get anything, and it wasn't like transportation in other cities. I think this is a step in the right direction, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to get us to where we need to be.
All right, well, this week, we'll move on now. Jim Beard, the former chief financial officer for the city of Atlanta during Mayor Kasim Reed's administration, pleaded guilty to charges of federal program theft and obstructing an IRS audit. Now, Beard had been indicted on multiple charges by a federal grand jury in 2020 while he ran the city's Department of Finance from 2011 to 2018. He now faces a maximum penalty of 13 years in prison, Phil.
Well, that was too short a prison term. He was a total disgrace. It was a culture of corruption under former Mayor Kasim Reed. I've lost count as to how many people were indicted and convicted during those years. Kasim Reed was lucky that he didn't get indicted for anything. And it was so blatant what James Beard did. I mean, buying firearms on your on your city credit card, et cetera, meals. A last final chapter, and of course it again tarnishes Reed's legacy.
All right, one more issue to get to in this block. The Fulton County Commission meeting on Wednesday night became heated over a call to restore animal services in the city of Atlanta. It's just an ongoing issue between the city and the county over the cost of animal services, and there's just no resolution yet, Kathy.
Somebody needs to cross the street and have a conversation. I mean, this is ridiculous. I think that, you know, the fact that the city apparently owes the county some money for past services under the lapsed contract, and now they don't want to pay. It's a mess. But the Fulton County and the city of Atlanta have got to work closely together as partners because there's just too much at stake. And I'm sorry to see this.
I am too. I mean, how do you deal with stray animals when...
Well, and it does seem like a lot of bullying and back and forth, and a lot of, to your point about walking across the street and having a conversation, it seems like this has been stuff that should have been talked about over a long period of time that isn't being talked about. And you're right. Fulton County, you know, Gainesville's in the middle of Hall County. They have to work together. Atlanta's in the middle of Fulton County. They have to work together. They got to figure out how to do it.
The other jurisdictions have weighed in and said, agreed to it, like Sandy Springs, other Fulton County cities.
And that's what, again, I think my colleagues are right. This should have been taken care of months ago.
All right, Leisha.
Yeah, and I think it is going to be worked out. It's my understanding that there has to be an intergovernmental agency agreement passed by the City Council, which has not been done yet. But there was a letter of intent presented to Fulton County. They essentially rejected it. And so I agree with everyone that it's unfortunate. They just need to work together. It sounds like some egos and other things that are involved. But again, we're not thinking about people. A few years ago, there were 2 kids who were mauled and killed by pit bulls in the city of Atlanta. So this is a very serious issue, and we can't just let stray animals who could be dangerous to communities be out while adults are arguing over politics. So hopefully this gets resolved very, very quickly.
All right, well, we can all agree on animals. So that's
right.
How about that? All right.
Yeah, I know.
Up next, a scathing report on the state of Defax in Georgia by Senator John Ossoff.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
U.S. Senator John Ossoff has released a scathing report on Georgia's Child Welfare Agency, saying systemic failures have allowed kids to die and that hundreds of children have been sex trafficked while under state care. Now, Defax has fired back Tuesday, releasing a point-by-point rebuttal and a statement accusing Ossoff of political gamesmanship. Alicia, what are your takeaways from this report?
You know, I'm almost speechless when I think about how awful this report is, the findings that are in there, children who are dying, who are being neglected. You know, our system is created for kids who have been neglected by their parents to ensure that they are kept safe. And this report and the work that's happening is showing that we as a state are neglecting those children too. Now, let me say, yes, there is good work happening at Defax. People are trying hard. There are changes that are being made. However, when children are dying, we've seen on the news several times in the last few months where reports were made, Defax didn't do their due diligence. 3 days, 5 months later, depending on the case, the child is dead. And if the job had been done effectively and correctly, if staff had been trained properly, if the leadership was doing their job, lives would be saved. And so this is a serious issue. I think one of the worst parts of this is to see Defax, DHS essentially dismiss this as political, as politics. That's disgusting. I have not seen yet where they have taken responsibility for the mishaps, for the mismanagement.
Well, let me say it, because this is a complicated, messy situation, right? It's just, it's very difficult dealing with kids like this. And I mean, the hoteling issue was a major issue in Georgia, and Candace Brose took that on, head on, and got these kids out of the hotels, so they're not having to be watched 24/7 in hotels. Got them into foster families or group homes.
Yes, and I count that as one of the things that have been improved. I appreciate that. Again, but when we're talking about this report that comes out and they have an opportunity to address it in the media, your response should not be, oh, this is political grandstanding. What it should be is, you're right, we have some very serious issues. We take this seriously. Here are the things that we fix, but we know we are wrong and we have got to address this to save lives. That's not the tone of this department, and that is unacceptable. And I'd like to see some Republicans and Democrats stand up and say, we have to do what's best for children.
Well, maybe not wrong, but like, we're all in this together.
Agreed.
Well,
right?
that's right. And you know, Senator Blackburn was with Ossoff on this. Now, I think the timing was bad. Ossoff controlled the timing to jab at Republicans. Commissioner Brose, that we're talking about, you know, was appointed by Governor Kemp. But yes, we don't like it when children are dying. That goes without saying. It should go without saying. And there are some terrible things in the report. And yes, it is an oversight committee. And yes, they have a job to do. But I don't like, especially what the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has done. They mainly had all of the negatives, and there was very little about Commissioner Brose and what good things are happening. It's a bureaucracy. I don't disagree that some things are falling through the cracks, but I think that since she's been commissioner, we've had a lot more reform going on.
And Kathy, tell me like a state. I mean, I wish this report was about all the other 49 states, because this is only about Georgia. Tell me a state that gets this right all the time. There isn't one.
Well, I don't know. There might be one, but I don't know what it is. I'll have to come back next week and say it. But my concern is some of these problems are as a result of public policy decisions, right? We have a governor whose leadership involves giving back tax dollars as quickly as he can, while we have, you know, agencies like Defax or our prison system that are kind of starving on the vine. Some problems can get fixed just because you put more money to them, and I think this is one of those cases. If people are underpaid, if they don't have the tools they need to take care of kids or track kids, then, you know, you're going to be putting a Band-Aid on a terrible wound.
They're state employees, so they have been getting increases along with the money that the state has been allocating for that. And I do think that, I think your approach is a good one, talking about how we can talk about what's good and what isn't good. But one of the points that stuck out to me is that what they said in response was that they used a lot of their own reports, but they came to different conclusions than the Ossoff report did. And I think it's fair to look at both of those and find out.
What about the ombudsman's report? They had one too, and they rejected that one as well.
Look,
and can I ask one question though? I'm curious how you all think about the fact that there was a citizens review panel that was appointed by outside people, and now some of the changes that they're making is that Defax themselves or DHS will be appointing a citizens review panel. Does that seem like a fair process that's going to be transparent?
Well, I hope it's going to be transparent. Yeah.
You can't police yourselves.
A
You
fox
say that all
can't
the time.
guard the hen house.
yes,
That's what
but
I'd like to say.
But I just said you have an oversight
There's a
committee.
lot of work to be done here,
To the
though, and they need to
problems
work
and the
to
fact
get.
that they will not allow themselves to be held accountable.
I don't have a problem with
Okay,
Senator
I gotta wrap
Ossoff
it.
One
doing
thing-
the oversight. I don't have a problem with that.
Where it does look like gamesmanship, though, is that there really has been not much working together on this. It's been more Senator Ossoff doing his thing and
I'll
Brooks
agree
doing their
there.
thing.
I gotta wrap it, guys, because we
Got
gotta
it.
have time for
Sorry.
winners and losers. Be right back.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Quickly.
You know, I'm going to make my winner Mayor Andre Dickens because I think he's really going out on a limb here on this MARTA thing, and I think it's the right thing to do. And my loser is going to be Leonardo DiCaprio for butting his nose into business that isn't his at the Okefenokee Swamp.
He's an author and an activist. Kathy?
Oh, I'll have to make him my winner. The Okefenokee Swamp is everybody's business. Thank him for raising attention to that. My loser is Governor Brian Kemp for his $1.1 billion skirting of the procurement processes to give $350 to 3 million voters right before the election when he gave some tax refunds. I hope there'll be a lot more looking into that.
Phil.
Well, the Masters tournament wraps up today, and you and your son got to go for the first
He
time.
did.
It's
It was
always a
amazing.
wonderful event.
Beautiful.
Everybody ought to put that on their bucket list. And
Yes.
the loser is Joe Biden, the president, presiding over those inflation numbers. Horrible. He keeps saying the economy's great. No, it's not. He's a loser.
Alicia, real quick. I got
My winner is the illustrious Spelman College. We celebrated our 143rd year since being founded in the basement of a church with just 11 students in the Bible. So happy Founders Day.
We'll leave it there. Make it a great week, everyone.